this is Red Hawk, and I'm coming to you from the deep end. It's good to have you all with us today. And today we're going to talk about what is the language that nature speaks? What is the underlying reality, fundamental language? And we've had a great journey. You know, we hope you've enjoyed it. We've gone through being, how being becomes life, how life becomes consciousness, through these three essential processes of complexification, differentiation, and semi-permeability. And through all this, really, what is the fundamental language of the universe, of nature herself, that has allowed all of this to happen? Now, if we really look at the way that these languages of nature have worked, we originally saw them as poetry, as poetic, religion. To me, we can touch on Taoism today because we're going to find that there's a lot more to that than maybe meets the eye. But through poetry, to science, to computers, the binary, is the world made up of yes and no's, to quantum. If we really think about it, from Planck's length to black holes to entanglement, this puts our understanding of space-time at odds with some pretty strange things. It's interesting that Parmenides, Bishop Berkeley, Alfred North Whitehead, and James Jean, an astronomer, they all said the universe looks less and less like a big machine and more like a great thought. And if we look at John Wheeler, who in the 70s began to say, it was actually at a lecture at the Oxford Relativity Conference, he said, there may be no such thing as the glittering central mechanism of the universe. Not machinery, but magic may be the better description of the treasure that is waiting. I really like that. Science has taken us to the edge of the magical. I like that a lot. We've gone from computers, which think in this binary sense of yes and no, to the quantum. From yes and no to all directions at once is what we're talking about. Quantum physics is the study of matter and energy at its most fundamental level. If you look at, what is the quantum of light? It's a photon. If you look at what's the quantum of electricity, it's the electron. And if we go into the subatomic particles, look at a tachyon. That little puppy seems to be going backwards in time. There's no way we can track it going forward in time. It looks like the fundamental language of nature is quantum, a quantum language, which means that the mystics' understanding of all things being inextricably interconnected all at once is being confirmed. Einstein said, and I've used this quote a lot because it's one of my things I hold close to the heart to keep me reminded. All sense of separation is optical delusion. And the Tao is a poetic language that's trying to get at something, this fundamental language that underlies all of 10,000 things. The statement, we are one, is now becoming real in the very literal sense. Not mere belief, but literal. Our science is just now scratching the surface of an underlying language of nature and the universe, and it is a quantum language of the small and the great, of consciousness and the inseparability of everything, every energy, every movement, every bit of what we call matter. The quantum language of the universe brings us to the very front porch of We Are One. The unity of being, life, and consciousness is at our doorstep. And to me, we've talked a lot about how the stories and the narratives are those things that need to be told. This is part of the collective survival story. The interconnection of everything is now fact. The next, or maybe the final opening to move the human family more in accord with the deepest nature of the universe lies in our having a sense of these stories that show us that all the differences make the beauty. The sameness lets us share it, but in all of it, we're inextricably connected. You know, I used to do youth groups, and I'd have the young people get in a big circle, and I'd have them all turn to the right, so they were facing each other's rear end. And then I would say, sit. And they would each sit on each other's lap in a big circle, and it was awesome. It was all interconnected. You see, everything is leaning on everything, and we are living inside, literally, of a quantum symphony of oneness. I met a woman from Pakistan at our party the other day, and she talked about her name, which is Nagamadia or something like that, and it meant song. I'm a song being sung. And I think that is a great way of us understanding who we are, how we fit into the symphony. Do we live in accord? Do we live in discord? Do we live in harmony? All of these things become a whole different order of experience when we begin to see that even at the very edge of the universe, which something's going on that is past science and into the magical, into something to do with the magic of consciousness and how consciousness engages in this mystery of interconnectedness. Now, I just laid out a whole lot. I do think mathematics is not the language of nature, but that mathematics is able to present models to help us understand some of what the language is trying to imply and get us to see. I think that's Lao Tzu's, when he wrote the Book of Tao, it was elusive. Why? Because you can't touch it. Because it's the place where the fundamental vibrations of being, this is what string theory is about, which, by the way, is not doing too well, that all of these things are connecting. Now, I've just thrown out a whole lot, but I do want us to see that the language of the universe is a quantum language, that the human family has just scratched the surface, and we're just beginning to get flits of what that language is and how we can relate to it. And then once again, it gets into balance, harmony, and living in accord. All of those things are integral. Now, having said all that, again, my name is Red Hawk. This is our 302nd episode, and I want to welcome my co-hosts, Marianne Rudis and Bob Hayes. And Marianne, let's start with you. What do you say of this quantum language that is nature herself?
Well, I can very much relate to the magical piece of all of this, the mysterious piece. When it comes down to the scientific part, I know what I can take that in, and you know what amazes me is we've been taught these things in religion and in spirituality for many, many years, that we're all one, we're all part of the same thing, that there are, everything is happening at once. And I remember being taught that and thinking, well, then everything's predetermined. If everything's happening, it's already happened, it's already here, then it's all determined. And yet, within all of that, it's like, no, there's still choices and decisions to make. And now, as science is starting to go into this quantum realm, I mean, they even call it spooky sometimes, right?
Oh, yeah.
That they're seeing these things, that mystical teachings, and you touched on this, these mystical teachings they're being able to observe them, where before there wasn't any observation. It was only personal experience, or it was insight, or maybe one person observed it, but it couldn't be measured scientifically. And so now, as we're starting to, and like you said, scratch the surface of this, it all comes back down to the idea that, yeah, we're part of something that we have yet to discover what we're part of. And I think this desire to understand it, this desire to explain it, to live fully in it and what that means, is a quest that I've been on for many, many years. So, yeah, that's.
And, I'm going to suggest that it's the only game in town, that journey. Bob, what say you?
Okay, well, I guess the topic today has been really what I've been searching for my whole life, just in broad strokes. What's the language of the universe, and what's it telling us to do, or is it communicating? Well, I think that science, philosophy, psychology has chipped away at that. And I think systems theory has really advanced that chipping away at what the language really is, because we've learned that systems all operate under certain rules, one of them being balance, homeostasis, different things that are true all the way through every system that we can identify. And I don't think we've gotten enough information on the quantum realm yet to start applying those broad strokes. But I think that the indication is based upon the fact that it's everywhere else, that there are certain broad strokes, and we could list them out. It's like the way a nerve fires. It has to accumulate a certain amount, and then it jumps. The way an electron moves from different levels within the atom are certain jumps that are based upon reaching a certain point. The way a dog either attacks or pulls back is because it's reached a certain point, and we've gone in water in a pipe. You reach a point where it hits turbulence, and that jumps to another state. So those things are all happening everywhere. And I think that we're beginning to take those broad brush strokes at parts of the universe that we don't understand yet, and we're chipping away at it more and more all the time. But as Arthur Clarke said, any sufficiently advanced technology cannot be distinguished from magic. So the universe is infinite, thus the questions about the universe are infinite. So here we are at the deep end, and let's keep chipping.
There you go. And what I hear you saying, Marianne, is science is just validating a common human experience of belonging, of feeling a part of this higher order that Bob has talked about. We've thought in terms of content all over the place, and now we're thinking in terms of these systems, which is a higher order of understanding our content. In other words, the content doesn't exist by itself. It exists in relationship. And we also, Bob, you brought this in, whether you knew it or not, the concept of energy, that everything we see as matter is really just energy, and it's taken this form. The quantum leap of an electron, it literally, the energy is increased, and all of a sudden the electron moves to another orbit, but it doesn't pass in the space in between. Quantum entanglement, two particles that are in relationship, even if you put them a universe apart, it's instantaneous. Their relationship, what you do to one happens to the other. We're seeing that our concepts of space and time, we're starting to see the limitations of them. And what we see is we keep moving to a world that gets bigger and more complex every day. If you keep up, you'll see that that's what's happening. Complexification, differentiation, and semi-permeability. What we let in and what we keep out. This is still happening. And I am convinced that consciousness is inextricably connected to the very quantum nature. There are things happening in us. We get into quantum tunneling, and every at every connection in your brain, that the smallness of those connections allow for quantum tunneling, which, Bob, you said it. We don't know what this stuff is. We just know something's going on. And, spooky is a good word for it. I think that was Einstein's word. Mystery. A WTF all over the place.
But we can begin to see the effects of these things that we don't understand what's going on. We still don't know what gravity is, but we can study the effects of gravity, even though we don't know how it works. We don't know why it bends the universe in certain ways, why it affects time. We have no idea, but we observe that those things happen. And that's what I mean by this chipping away, this just keep and talking about it. Don't forget, human beings make up a system too, actually, of many different systems at many different levels. And all that communication that's going on among different human beings in all these different ways are analogous to the nervous system firing off millions and trillions of times. And we're riding that wave, like you say it all the time, Red Hawk. We're right up there. Something's going on. Something's changing. Something in the world is rearranging. And if it works like the quantum realm, we're getting ready to jump.
Let's hope.
Or surf for a very long time, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I love the idea that this is all observation. We're observing all of these things to try to uncover these rules, the laws, and to figure out, okay, how do we use those laws and figure out what it is we're doing here, right?
Yeah. People forget that science always starts with observation. You observe certain things, and then you think about, well, why are these things interconnected? What's going on here? And then you come up with some kind of a hypothesis or a theory that you can test and see how well that agrees with what you observed. And throwing quantum, and the observer is now affecting what it is they're observing. So that makes it even more mysterious.
Yeah.
Well, it changes it, right? Doesn't the observer change the outcomes?
Absolutely.
Well,
we don't know in which way.
It really gets back to living in accord, and in accord with what? We think of nature as ecosystems and environment, and yet the ecosystem and the environment is leaning on a whole series of processes and forces outside of that, from the sun to, well, I guess we could go electromagnetic stuff, which has saved the planet numerous times, which is basically a result of a molten iron core that keeps moving and moving around, and it creates an electrical field which is protecting us, which is an amazing thing. All these things are integral to the interconnectedness. And when we start seeing ourselves as gift, as this breath is a gift of the universe to me, and even the concept of me is a gift of the universe. One physicist, I think it was Fred Alan Wolf, talked about the human beings being the growing edge of God. That we are the ones reaching now, that whatever the 7-pound thing up here, or however many pounds this brain is, we are reaching. We are the next piece of complexification, differentiation, and semi-permeability. And what comes out of that, in my mind, gets back to living in accord and bringing a new sense to the universe. That sense is called justice and love and respect and honor and humility, all of these things that we have to show with each other if the human family is going to survive. And again, I think we're in the middle of a huge collective survival event. And we're on the edge of it. People have asked me, do you think there's going to be a war on the planet? And I said, yeah, it'll be a nuclear war, and it'll probably last 30 to 90 minutes. It won't last long, because the leaders that are left hopefully will have a little bit of sanity and go, we got to stop. The human family is the universe in a coalesced place. And we have now got to find our place within the universe. This is part of what Da Vinci was doing. The whole thing with Da Vinci is, what is the human being's proportion to the universe? Damn. We're still working on that. Even with scratching the surface of understanding that the universe is not doing a bunch of yes and no's, but in every direction at once. All the maybes in between yes and no, it's all happening at once. And we are part of that. And I will say it, every human being is the universe in one of its iterations. And you, my listener friends, you are an iteration of the whole universe itself. It is, you embody it. I embody it. Each of us do. When we begin to entertain stories in which the responsibility of that is born and we carry it, and we begin to really have a sense of empathy and concern for each other, then I think the human family will be more hopeful. Right now, even empathy is getting a bad rap on the right. It's being said, you're telling us I should feel bad because somebody was enslaved. Well, I'm not telling you that. I'm saying if you don't feel that way, how can you call yourself truly and wholly human? And that gets into whole other issues of quantum understanding within us, because these same spooky relationships are happening, I believe, within the human family. I believe that as the planet begins to reach its next shifting point, and I think it is. I think climate change is dealing with that, but I think there are going to be all kinds of earthquakes and stuff. The human family is also experiencing those things. And I'm convinced in my mind that there is a relationship. We know that the earth has a vibration of, I think it's 7.83 hertz. That's 7.83 vibrations a second. And we also know that when we talk about alpha waves in our brain, where we're most relaxed, that wavelength is 7.83. So there's living in accord, there's vibration, I think string theory, the whole concept of harmony and discord, those will become, I believe, more a part of our language of morality, of ethics, of justice, of love, and truth. And of course, I could be wrong. This is my best guess of the moment. I'll wake up at 3 a.m. and go, some bitch, I got that wrong. But I think that that's part of what the three of us are here to do, just to talk about what's bubbling up and how do we engage it and how do we make something of it that is truly good. Does that make sense? I just threw out a whole lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the things that as you were talking, I kept thinking about, it's this idea as human beings that we're separate from each other, we're separate from nature. And this conversation, this discussion is all about that journey back to the understanding that we're not separate, that we're all part of the same thing. And even like when you mentioned the vibration of the earth and the vibration of, that's all of that is part of who we are. I wear a bracelet somebody gave me that has the phase of the moon when I was born. And it's a reminder that all of these things influence who we are and what we do. And, and again, it goes back to even the ancient religions, that we're all just trying to we differentiated, right? We have all of these iterations of what it could mean to be a human being. And how do we come back understanding that we're all one, and yet be able to retain some of that beauty, that diversity. And I think that's kind of, for me, that's where my mind goes. It's like there has to be a purpose to these differences, and there has to be a beauty in it that I look for. And yet there's underlying all of us the same thing. We're all the same. I don't know.
And we're all rooted in this reality that has the same needs with each of us, no matter what your iteration. And that's the piece that we need to start coming together on. And speaking of coming together, we're getting to the end of our time. So, Bob, I'll ask you for your final comments first.
Well, I'm going to go back to the idea of the Tao. And all through it, it says you can't understand what the Tao is. But all through it, it also says you can learn to feel in accord with the Tao, move in accord with the Tao, live in accord with the Tao. And that's what I think Marianne has been getting at in terms of feeling that we're connected to the one. And things like empathy, all of these great traits that we've identified both humanistically and scientifically are innate within us. You don't have to teach someone empathy. You have to avoid killing the empathy that is already within them. And that is what we have to learn to feel within ourselves, our connection and our movement in accord with the language of the universe.
Amen.
And that means follow all these road signs that we've seen and learn to feel within ourselves that connection.
Wow. Marianne, final comments?
You know, I'm not sure I have much more to add other than, you know, I spent a lot of time trying to understand why we're here and what we're supposed to do with this. And I think as we start to understand that there's this fabric that we're a part of, maybe that's just it. That's it. We're just a part of something, and we don't know exactly what that is yet, but our desire keeps us searching to see that final picture, to see the full expression. And empathy and love, I think, fostering those, and I think you're absolutely right, Bob. I think those are innate, and they are bred out of us, that we're taught different things. And so how do we find our way back to our true essence? So here we go.
Amen. And I think that is the journey. And we hope that today's journey, you've embraced some of this. You know, we're on the edge of mystery here on all fronts. And we've talked about, you know, what we're a part of is a mystery. But I can say this with absolutely no reservation, with great certainty. Whatever it is we're a part of, it is magnificent. It is extravagant. It is a freaking trip. And we've talked about this peace, this semi-permeability, and we've talked about this before. Empathy. What is empathy? You see, some people think empathy is a feeling. I think empathy as a feeling is great, but it is totally inert and inactive if it does not lead to action. For me, empathy is action. Empathy, pathos, gets you moving. It allows you to see. You know, compassion is wanting to put an end to another's suffering. You know, that's an amazing thing. This empathy, it changes. And it doesn't change something so you can feel better or feel worse. It changes so that you can step into the world and touch it with a new sense of being and love. Till next week, think about it. Empathy. Until then, know you're a quantum event, and yee-haw, and many blessings.